Yo, back at you with a Tuesday night live stream. Let me go ahead and get Instagram on board and we can make this thing pop. Um, all right, Instagram's on board. So tonight on Blerding While Dad, I got a lot of places to go and a little time to get there. So um my outline is crazy, which is not a bad thing, I mean, um I'm excited. I have a lot to talk about, and so hopefully I can power through this and y'all can listen to me ramble here. Jump on, leave a comment or whatnot, let me know you're watching, and we're gonna get into this thing. Talk to you after the intro. Peace. All right, first things first. Welcome to the Tuesday night live stream. Um, I really am hell bent on making this a thing, an ongoing feature. Just because Tuesday nights is the night where I can actually sit down and do this stuff. Um, I'm getting a lot of good traction on YouTube or whatnot, and so I'm going to actually build out a community around this. We're going to talk about comic books. We're going to talk about parenting. We're going to talk about issues affecting Black parents. Um, if we want to have a conversation about, let's see, the lack of an actual feeling of a Black community in the Marvel universe, we're gonna chop it up about that. And so, that's what I'm building out. So I'm building out a Patreon where um, have a lot of my more unfiltered rants. Um, I don't know if I'm going to be doing the live stream on YouTube much longer. I think I might save that as an exclusive for Patreon, and maybe as an exclusive um, for Patreon, and maybe as a Discord exclusive. I'm not sure, um, but those are the things I got cooking. I'm really enjoying this. This is something I've needed. I haven't done my podcast in almost 5 years, and it was kind of something that was missing in my world. So I said all that to say this. Let's get into it. Um, wow. So here I sit, about a night removed from the first night of school, and I'm gonna have two high schoolers, bro. Like, this is crazy. Um, both of my little ones are gonna be high schoolers, and I don't quite know what to make of this. Um, you know, when they're born, you sit there and you're like, damn, I want to see what they're going to be like when they get older. I'm excited to see how their personality develops. And when they get older, you're like, damn, I wish I could go back to when they were just little and we were their universe. Because watching our kids grow up is a beautiful thing, and it's an amazing thing. It's a scary thing. Um, but I'm getting a chance to see the people that they're going to be, getting the chance to see what kind of ownership and accountability they take over the outcomes that they create. We've already had the conversation about grade expectations and stuff because we had some stumbles last year, and watching them own things that didn't go right and try to put together plans on how things are going to be better is really amazing. Watching them problem solve, and so it's humbling as a father that both of my kids are in high school because I don't quite know what to make of that. Um, they were just in elementary. I just like it felt like I was literally just dropping them off at the elementary school yesterday. And I'm not, I know that's pedantic. I don't know if pedantic's a word. I know that's trite, but it's real. It was just like a warp speed. And now I got high schoolers. So, um, I'm excited to see where this journey goes. I'm scared because I'm a blink and we're going to have one graduating. I don't know what to do with that. That's the real dad talk. Like, we sit here and watch our goal is to raise kids that turn into adults that are able to chase their own dreams. And we're almost there. and I don't want it to end. I don't want the ride to end. I enjoy my kids. I enjoy having kids. I know there's a lot of discourse on the internet about how parents are miserable. I wasn't miserable as a parent. I've enjoyed I've enjoyed it. And it's tough to see, because you're always going to be a parent. I know that, but they're becoming their own people. They've always been their own people, but now they're really becoming their own people. And it's kind of scary. I'm excited and terrified at the same time. But watching who they are has really been a blessing. It's really been amazing to see. So both of my kids are in high school, and I don't quite know what to do with that. Hopefully, I've given them the set of skills so they can navigate through this school system, and retain who they are, because a lot of, and it's not just a function of, oh, I'm anti-school and schools are bad and all this other stuff, but it's a function of the system that we put our black children into. Sometimes it extracts pieces from them that we can never get back. And so we've been fighting to cling on to those. So, like I said, I don't want to start on a down note, but I'm really excited and scared and kind of sad, but excited mostly. I got high schoolers now. So, um, so one of the things I've talked about, and I don't. It used to be when the comic book movies things, and I'm going off on a tangent here because I'm going off script here. Um, when I was coming up, um, you know, 80s, 90s, there was this assumption in the world that if it was a comic book movie, it was going to be cheeks, it was going to be ass. Um, that was the assumption. That was the underlying assumption that you made when you sat down to watch that comic book movie. This thing is going to suck. This is going to be awful. And we've reached a point in society where we're actually getting pretty much competently produced and directed and acted and coherent comic book movies. And we don't know how to fucking act with it. We don't know how to act with it. Um, as it is with nerd culture, one of the things that nerds do is nerds are really good about destroying that which they love and tearing it down. Oh, I turned on my light. Nerds are amazing at shitting on things that they love. It's a reflex. They reflexively hate the stuff that they love. And so what I'm saying is this: I feel like that we're kind of experiencing that right now. Um, we hear, yeah, all the Marvel fatigue, blah blah blah, the comic book movie fatigue, and it's just um it's just a byproduct of oversaturation in the market. And yeah, Marvel's made some strategic fumbles. I'm not so hard on them. DC has made some strategic fumbles. I'm not so hard on them. I'm a little bit harsher on like some of the individual creators, but that's another topic. I don't think that it's as fatigue as much as the fact that we're just used to comic book movies now. And so it used to be the barometer was if it was a comic book movie, it was going to suck. And then Iron Man came out, and it kind of set this bar where every comic book movie came out after that and wraps this. And it's not just Iron Man, because the Nolan verse, the Batman movie started. Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises, or Dark Knight Rises, all that stuff. Um, it set this bar, this expectation that every single comic book movie was going to be a banger. And I think it actually goes back to Spider-Man, because Spider-Man shocked a lot of people, like how good that first Spider-Man movie was. And then the second one was just, people were just blown away. And so it started raising the bar and our expectations for what comic book movies were supposed to be. And I think we've kind of reached this kind of homeostasis where we're seeing a run of average comic book movies. That's not a bad thing. They're still enjoyable. I like plenty of average movies. I like some bad movies. I don't necessarily think that's the, you know, written in Sanskrit end of days for comic book movies. I don't think it's the comic book movie apocalypse or anything. I do honestly believe that it's just a matter of um there we're used to them coming out. Like there's no there's nothing different about it. We're just used to comic book movies coming out now. Whereas before it was a rare occurrence and the movie was going to be trash. And that was kind of the assumption that you made. I paid my own money to see Spawn in the movie theater. And I'm still kind of have a little bit of PTSD behind that because it was so bad and how I forced myself to like it. But that was the bar, that was the expectation. It was going to be trash. I paid my own money to see that Judge Dredd joint with Sylvester Stallone. That was awful. It was awful when it came out. It was awful then. And so I think we've been spoiled to a degree because we've had some ones that were really like actually amazing, solid action movies. And they got the genre and they hit all the buttons. And some of them actually gave emotional moments and stuff. And people were fully invested. And it was more of a moment when it happened. It was more of a experiencing and living in a moment. You know, with Endgame, you know, Infinity War. Like there was moments that, you know, people can relate to how they have a visceral theater experience. Not every comic book movie is going to do that. And to have that expectation for everyone that drops is kind of stupid. Sorry, doesn't make any sense. And so I think we are in this spoiled time where now we expect that comic book movies are competently run and shot. But I'm old enough to have rented the Dolph Lundgren Punisher movie and remember how much of a mess that was. Even the Thomas Jane Punisher movie was a convoluted mess of things happening. And it was taking some of the Grant Morrison stuff and mixing it in. And it just the tonality didn't match. The music didn't even match the tone of the movie. And it was just a big, weird thing. But it was competently shot and you can kind of follow it. For a while, that was not the case in comic book movies. It was just a jumbled mess of ideas. And so I think we've been spoiled. And I'm saying all that to say this discourse around the Fantastic Four movie. And before that, the Superman, you know, the Superman movie. I haven't seen Superman. I haven't seen the Superman joint. I want to. I saw half of the Fantastic Four, and there's a story behind that. My impressions of the Fantastic Four was I really enjoyed it. I know that's not a popular sentiment. I know a lot of people who've seen it were mad because of whatever. It hit the marks for a Fantastic Four movie. In my mind, a Fantastic Four movie had to be a period piece. It had to be set apart from the Marvel universe that we currently exist in. And it had to really emphasize the nature of this being a family. And it hit those notes because that's what the Fantastic Four comics are. And there's a lot of fake comic book. There's a lot of people who watch comic book movies, and that's cool. I love that fact. But they didn't necessarily read the comic books, and they're trying to say that this thing doesn't match the source material, but they have no point of reference to understand what the source material is because they ain't never read the source material, which is fine. You don't have to. I don't think there should be a prerequisite to watch to read the source material to understand a comic book movie. I think that's a ridiculous bar of expectation. But what I am saying is this: if you're going to critique a movie, understand if you're going to critique a movie as not being based on the source material, or you're not following the source material, at least have a frame of reference underneath you to know what the source material is. The Fantastic Four comic books have always really been centered around the concept of family, to the cheesiness degree where it's kind of cheesy and eye-rolly, but you know, there's entire comics where it's just where there's a huge chunk of the comic where it's Ben and the Human Torch, Ben and Johnny pranking each other. Like, That's what it is. And so that's part of the Fantastic Four mythos. The synergism thing, which they don't really speak about, and I don't know if it's a new thing or not, but if they're apart from each other, the powers start to fade. They're kind of dependent on one another. Um, I like the fact that Ben was a little bit more subdued in this because the Ben I grew up with kind of vacillated between the blue-eyed idol of millions thing who was kind of over the top, and then the broody um I'm trying to find ways to take myself off of here kind of thing. Because I read the Thing miniseries, and it was talking about depression, and it was dark, and there was inner darkness with the Fantastic Four. And then when Ben had a secondary mutation and it made him even more monstrous, it was even a different thing, because now we're talking about Ben trying to suicide himself. And so, like, it took it to that level. I like this more subdued thing. Plus, he had that shit on. Like, the Thing was dressed, bro. Like, I'm sitting there watching this movie, and all I can think is, yo, the Thing is actually fly in this movie. Like, he's the best dressed character in Marvel. I don't know. He's the best dressed character in the Marvel movies, bro. Like, he was killing him, bro. The Thing was killing him in that movie, bro. The fits were just, he was like, I'm getting these fits off, bro. Like, that was his superpower, was putting that shit together and getting those fits off. That was like a superpower. And I was jealous of some of those fits that he was rocking. Like, I'm sitting there like, okay, I see the vision here, and I enjoy the vision. But that being said, and I'm caveat out in all this, I only saw half of this movie because we're enjoying the movie. My wife and I are sitting there having a good time, and we get a call, my son and daughter at the pool party, and we got to make the run over to the ER because daughter swallowed some water. We're worried it got into her lungs. We had to take her to the ER to get x-rayed. And so I had to put a pin in the Fantastic Four movie so that you guys have my full review. All I know is I saw Galactus. I thought Galactus was dope. I don't have a problem with the female Silver Surfer. I don't know. My boy Jimmy didn't like it. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. But I'm also not. I wasn't all. I was a silver. I collect. It was weird. I collected Silver Surfer books, but I wasn't a Silver Surfer fan. I read a lot of Silver Surfer in the '90s, but I wasn't a huge fan of the character. I just did because he's cool looking. But I don't necessarily have a problem with the gender swap Silver Surfer because I think that leaves the lane open for them to have a mainstream universe Silver Surfer. And so I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think they hit a lot of the notes of the characters pretty well. I think so far what I've seen in the movie, Ben, I mean, I'm biased. I'm a mark for the Thing. Thing is one of my favorite characters. But I think they hit out of the park with Ben. Johnny was I liked, but I think Sue, I think they kind of nailed it with Sue. And so I'm interested to see what happens in the rest of the movie. Please don't spoil it for me. Because we're gonna probably take the kids to go see it. But so far, so good with the Fantastic Four. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think hopefully it could set up what's going on with Doctor Doom and how they move ahead with that. If there's something that happens with Doctor Doom in that movie, please don't tell me. Don't tell me before I see it. So I'm not negative on it, bro. But I also am not negative on a lot of comic book movies. The only ones I've really been negative on, where I'm like, I don't want to see this shit, are when Sony's trying to just spin off random characters from Spider-Man's mythos. Because Venom was cool. I don't have a problem with the Venom movies. At first I did, but I'm like, yeah, Venom had his own standalone series. I can rock with that. But when we got to do a movie with Craven, and I got to do a movie with Michael Morbius, and Madam Web, and all these like D tier, B and D tier, and C tier kind of players in the Spider-Man mythos. And Craven's one of Spider-Man's arch nemesis. He beat Peter's ass and threw him in a grave. I understand that. But does he need his own movie? Did he need his own movie? I didn't like where Sony has to try to spin off all these characters in the Spider-Man universe as standalone projects. I don't think Madam Web was an interesting enough of a character to put a full movie around Madam Web. Especially Mobius, or Morbius, whatever. That the Morbius, that was really an unnecessary side adventure. And so I'm not negative on comic book movies. I am negative on that batch of movies. I don't have any interest in seeing those. I may review them just for shits and gigs to maybe kind of go over them for the YouTube content, but I don't know. I just like it. I think that Marvel's getting back on track. I think they're just gonna have to rope in a new group of fans, you know, and they're gonna have to have that breakout movie that everybody's talking about. So we'll see what happens. So here's a thing. Here's a thing that wasn't on my bingo card for this year, and I got to pull it up here because we were driving to the Fantastic Four movie, like we were driving to it, and this pops up on my feed, and it's something I didn't have in my bingo card for 2025, but I want y'all to do me a favor. I want y'all to Google Radioactive Wasps. There's 4 of them now. Oh my God. So the thing I didn't have on my bingo card, and like we've already survived the murder hornet thing. We survived the invasion of the Asian wasps, whatever. Whatever the new scary thing is, the zombie cicada things that we're gonna zombify all the cicadas and stuff like that. We've reached the radioactive wasp nest part of the program. We have the election. Now we have radioactive wasps. So the story, the main line of it is, and I'm gonna show y'all the story to show you that I am not lying about this. This is not something I'm embellishing. So hold, please. 4 radioactive wasp nests found on South Carolina nuclear facility. 4 of them. When I saw this on Friday, there was 1 of them. There's 4 of them. And what I was struck with when I read the first article was they found an irradiated wasp nest. And it was like 4 times the standard radiation that they consider safe. And the wasp nest was empty. And so I know that they put that line in there to kind of set our minds at ease. Immediately, my mind goes, so there are radioactive wasps unaccounted for on the loose in South Carolina. So now we have 4 nests. So there's 3 more nests. Okay. The nest was part of was on a post near a tank that was storing nuclear waste. Whatever this gamma number is, contamination levels 10 times greater than total contamination values listed in the federal regulations for areas that require contamination posting and monitoring. It concluded the radioactivity nest was considered to be on-site legacy radioactive contamination, not related to the loss of contamination control. This is a lot of techie stuff. And I know that this article is supposed to set our minds at ease. And it's a Texarkana article, so it's really going to focus on the tech aspects of it. There's radioactive wasps flying around South Carolina, y'all. Now, if these give us superpowers, this may be a net positive for us. If it reduces people to a pile of mush with tumors on it growing out of it, this may be a net negative for us. We have yet to see, but it's amazing. There are radioactive wasps in the world. Like, I don't think anybody, when we stumbled into 2025 reeling from the stupid that it washed over the nation and installed white nationalists, I think people were like, it can't get any worse than this. And the universe rolled the dice and said, radioactive wasps. And now we got radioactive wasps in 2025. Okay. The main concern relates to whether there are large areas of significant contamination that could have escaped surveillance in the past. My main concern is are radioactive wasps flying around South Carolina? That's what my concern is, bro. I don't care about the nest being irradiated as much as what was in the nest and the fact there's nothing in the nest. So either the wasps are dead or they're on the loose. The first nest was sprayed to kill wasps and then bagged as radioactive waste. Uh, it didn't have any further contamination. The wasps themselves pose little risk to the community. They likely have lower contamination on them and generally don't stray more than a few hundred yards from their nest. Except we don't know how far radioactive wasps fly because there's never been radioactive wasps before. So we don't know if we have we don't know if we have Incredible Hulk wasps flying around, where these are Hulk wasps now, and they're gamma irradiated, and so they're bigger, stronger, and faster, and they can fly longer. I'm interested. I want to see the movie. I'm interested in the movie now. We've had Cocaine Bear. Now it's time for Radioactive Wasps, the movie. And like I said, if we get superpowers out of it, this might be the silver lining if there's superpowers involved, bro. We can hope. But is this how we get the new X-Men? That's the question for the chat. Or is this how we get X-Men in real life with radioactive wasps? Okay. I'm loving the lore on this, bro. I want to see where it goes. I'm invested 100% into the story. I need to see what happens. If we get X-Men out of this, then this might have all been worth it. All of it, every single bit of it, worth it. All the way up to what's happening in the White House. If the payoff is we now have superheroes with superhuman abilities from radioactive wasps, it's a net positive. Now, if it turns into weird humanoid wasps and they end up looking like Jeff Goldblum in The Fly, then y'all can keep that shit. I don't want any parts. If it turns into The Fly, I don't want no parts of that. Y'all keep that Cronenberg shit away from me. I don't want to see that. But if it's not, this might work out for all of us. So, radioactive wasps in South Carolina. Make sure you wear your bug spray, folks. Or not, if you want to try to get superpowers. Go see what you can do and check back. All right. So one of the things is when I was watching the Fantastic Four movie, I almost came out of my seat because I saw the reboot for The Running Man. And I'm with this. I am fascinated with the lore of The Running Man. I'm fascinated with the original story that Stephen King wrote. Like, I'm locked in. I'm actually locked in. And so my wife rolled her eyes because I'm like, we're gonna go. We must see this. Now, I'm not gonna, I'm kind of proud of her because we did see the new Predator movie, and she's like, "Oh, I want to see this." And if you know my wife, she is not interested in any Predator anything, and so she wants to see the new Predator movie. So I might be pressing my luck and stretching what we can do, but I'm trying to convince her to see The Running Man. Because this one looks like it's based on the Bachman book. When Stephen King was right under Richard Bachman. I've read the book. And I thoroughly enjoyed that book. And I saw the movie. And even though the original movie didn't have a damn thing to do with the book, I enjoyed that too. The one with Colin Farrell, I seen pieces of it and I said, this is trash. And I said that out loud and turned it off. So I haven't seen when they tried to do that. Or was that Total Recall? That had to be Total Recall. I don't think they've remade The Running Man. But it looks like this Running Man is really based on what they went for in the Bachman books, where it wasn't the over-the-top hunters and all that other stuff. Or it might be more of a combination of it. And so I'm just interested to see what they do with this. Like, I'm really, like, I didn't know that I could be this excited about this movie. And I really do want to see it. And Edgar Wright is doing it, and I fucks with Edgar Wright heavy. I really do. I love Edgar Wright movies, and so I'm excited to see where this goes. You know, the man that made Hot Fuzz can't do anything wrong. Okay. He also did the first X-Men. I mean, first Ant-Man. So I'm invested. I want to see what happens with the Running Man. Um, like I said, I was excited, bro. Like I'm really like that's probably one I'm gonna try to see when it drops. So the crazy part is the original movie was supposed to be a satire. And it's supposed to be one of those biting 80s satires. And for there was a stretch in the 80s where we were getting really, really dope action movies that were also really, really scathing political satires. I almost feel like we've lost the ability to have satires because everybody's media literacy is absolute trash right now, and it just goes over their head. And a lot of it has to do with George W. Bush and the No Child Left Behind, and the fact that kids don't understand context clues and things like that. Like uh, George W. Bush did a lot of fucking damage with No Child Left Behind. And one of the big hits is one of the reasons why you can find it is media literacy, because you have parents that don't have media literacy and they raise kids with no media literacy, and so it makes it harder to do satire because people don't get the joke. They end up latching on. If you want to know a perfect example of how I know that media literacy is cooked, look at the resurgence of how people are interpreting Starship Troopers. And um I understand what the intent is, and I understand there are multiple ways to see that movie. But if you understand, like when I first saw it, there was no question in my mind that the human beings were supposed to be the bad guys. And I got the Nazi allegories really quick. And this came out in 1997. So I was like 17, 18 years old. I picked up on that right away. The fact that people don't understand what Starship Troopers is supposed to be shows that media literacy is cooked in this country. And so the first Running Man was really supposed to be a send up of hyper capitalism and how we had this really strange um, commodification of human life where people were so fascinated by the money that they were actually enjoying the horror of what was happening in front of them, because it was a game show, but you're watching people get tortured to death. But it's a game show and there's prizes. That was a satire, y'all. Like the first Running Man was a satire. It was supposed to be a send up of hyper capitalism and how it was stripping us and robbing us of our humanity. And we were painting over the glitz and glam. We were painting over horror with glitz and glam. And so um I'm interested to see how much of a satire this one is, because I don't think we can do satires in 2025 because people just won't get it. You have the people that should understand what it is and should be 100% all in on it, and they're going to get pissed off and offended. And then the wrong people who the satire is making fun of are going to 100% latch onto it. It's what's happening with The Boys right now, where um the people that The Boys is supposed to be making fun of are like idolizing the Homelander and stuff. And the boys are kind of in this conundrum because they're like, okay, we're trying to show how horrible of a person he is, but y'all love him. Even the actor is kind of put off by it. Because it's supposed to be a satire. You know, and that's why the original Boys comic book didn't land, because it took the concept of satire and said, okay, so yes, it's supposed to be a send up of superheroes. What we're going to do is we're going to bludgeon you over the head with the point, to the point where it's ugly, and it's humorless. And it's just, ugh. The Boys comic book, I will still stand on this, is one of the worst things I've ever read outside of the Unfunnies. And I still got beef with Mark Miller for the Unfunnies, bro. That shit was trash. But I don't know if we can do satire in 2025. Is satire dead? Is this a future conversation? I think it is. I think it is a roundtable conversation for whenever one of y'all decides to pop in on the live stream. I think that's a conversation that needs to be had. Is satire dead? Have we reached the point where media literacy has fallen to the point where we can no longer do satirical content because it doesn't land with either audience? It doesn't land with the audience that they're trying to insult. It doesn't land with the audience that they're trying to entertain. So I'm hoping that this modern version does talk about violence in media, um, and reality TV shows, and how capitalism strips, how hyper capitalism, and shoot, even sometimes run of the mill capitalism does tend to strip, and some people really does tend to strip humanity from people, and how our media really treats violence as entertainment. Like, I mean, if we're being 100% buck here, um, our media does, and it's no fault. And here's the thing: a lot of times we like to blame the media personalities themselves, but they don't dictate how these shows roll out. They don't dictate necessarily a lot of times how they're formatted. Um, but the reason why shootings and massive acts of violence always are at the top of the hour is because it's entertainment for some of us. Some of us watch the news to actually be entertained. That's why we have a favorite news channel, because it's entertainment to a degree. And they know if they lead with who got killed on the top of the hour, they're going to retain more viewers. And I do feel sorry for the people that signed up for actual journalism, and actually wanted to change the world through their lens and through their storytelling and bringing, um, awareness to things in the world, that you've been relegated to. This is who got shot tonight. But I do think that we've taken on this form of violence as entertainment, and it's not new, because our media, our fictional media, has always been that. Uh, but now we're crossing over into that real world where, people share fight videos. I'm guilty of it. Hell, sharing fight videos and laughing at what happened. Um, you know, and it just keeps piling on. I remember really clearly. I forgot who got killed. It was around 2020, and somebody had just got shot. And oh no, it wasn't shot. It was George Floyd. Where I'm sitting there commenting. This is my very first reaction to the George Floyd thing was, wow, we just literally watched somebody get strangled to death on TV at the top of the hour. We're done, because it was presented as an entertainment piece. Not intentionally, but that's how it was formatted and presented. No trigger warning, no nothing. You just get to see somebody lose their life in front of your eyes. And so I want to see what they do with this story. I think that there's something there. I think there's something to be said for that. So I want to see what they do with the Running Man. That's why I'm fascinated by it, because the original book the original book was supposed to be a satire and send up of the degradation of our society, and poverty, and how we treated poor people, and treated their lives as entertainment for the rest of us. And then the movie was a kind of a send up of capitalism and violence as sport, and violence as entertainment. I want to see what they can do with this new movie. So I'm interested. Um, I do hope they stick to the Bachman thing, and how the Bachman book went. I think they can mix in the flashier hunters. Um, I think they can mix that in 100%. But I hope they stick with the format of the Bachman and don't go with it's in this underground mega duplex tunnel thing that they had in the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I like the fact of him traveling, and the hunters are traveling and chasing him around the world. So, this was a little bit late, because that was really a downer topic. This was a little bit late, so I'm gonna talk about it. But I got a kick out of this. So about a week ago on Raw, I saw the highlights. I didn't get a chance to watch the whole thing. But I saw the highlights where Bronson Reed took Roman Reigns' shoes. Listen, man. And I saw on wrestling Twitter, like, it's a cultural signifier. Like, there's a cultural signifier to understand what it means when you get jumped and somebody steals your shoes. Um, if you grew up in specific areas of the US, you knew exactly what happened. They stole Roman Reigns. He got jumped and they stole his shoes. If they would have taken his wallet, it would have been the ultimate disrespect. But if you got jumped and somebody stole your shoes, that means it was you was done. Like you was out, it wasn't safe for you on the streets. It wasn't safe. You either had to go get your shoes back the same way you lost them or you had to move. That was it. And so I got a kick out of it. And apparently the internet did too, because a lot of the tweets that were circulating around Roman Reigns getting his shoes took was a trip, bro. It was wild. And I had a really good time scrolling through X. Twitter. His mama named Twitter. I'm calling Twitter. I had a good time scrolling through Twitter, seeing how black wrestling fans were reacting to Roman Reigns getting his shoes took. Because, like I said, it's a cultural signifier. Depending on how you saw that or how you experienced that, it determined a lot about who you were as a person and how you came up. I'm just saying that it's not a bad thing, yo. It's not necessarily a bad thing, right? If you didn't grow up where there was an opportunity for you in a place where people got robbed, if you didn't grow up in a place where people get jumped and robbed, you would have no idea what people stealing Roman Reigns' shoes really meant. And that's okay. But if you grew up where I grew up, that was like, oh man, they stole his shoes, bro. It's on. He got to get it back in blood now. It's all over. And so I enjoyed that segment. I think it was kind of a nod to a little bit of hood shit. And I did appreciate that. But watching the internet react to it, it was a thing of beauty, because people don't know. They did it again. They took his shoes again. Let's go. Oh man, this is gonna be this is gonna be a good time here. I'm not gonna show too much WWE stuff because I definitely do not want to get that content warning. Where they're like, you can't show our stuff. But I can scroll through and read you some of these tweets. Like I said, the hood understood what happened to Roman Reigns. Even if the mainstream wrestling audience didn't get it, the hood understood exactly what what it meant when they took his shoes off of his feet, bro. I even told my wife about it. She's like, oh no, they didn't. Like, yeah, they took his shoes, bro. And my wife, she knew what that meant, bro. But reading the tweets, the realization when he realized he got robbed for his shoes again. They wearing the shoes on the dog. He got the shoes around his neck, bro. Listen, y'all don't understand. I had a good time with this, yo. Like scrolling through and looking and seeing the reactions to it. There's a split in the wrestling audience, because if you didn't grow up in the hood or around where like street violence was happening, you had no frame of reference, and people were legitimately confused by it, which was hilarious to me. Well, this is so stupid. Why are they taking his shoes? What does this mean? And immediately Casa grew up in the hood like, oh, it's on now. Roman got to get it back in blood, bro. So now this is how you get me into storylines. As a wrestling fan, I haven't really been following WWE. This is going to get me back in. This right here. They stole that man's shoes. He got to get it back in blood now. It's all over. And I know this is tied to Roman being the first WWE superstar to have his own Jordan exclusives. I'm with that, bro. But they stole this man's shoes. And so now it's all over. And if you don't know, Roman's shoe game is immaculate, bro. His shoe game is immaculate, and they've been stealing them. So now I'm interested to see what happens now, because it's got to be chaos. It's got to be violence. It's got to be pro wrestling. I'm 100% locked in. I am locked in. This is the first time that a storyline has really, really, really jumped off the page to me, and I must see what happens. I have to see what happens. You know what I'm saying? He got to come out. Roman, God, those are heat, yo. Like, look at those. I'm messing with those. So I'm interested. I'm invested. I need to, I do that. I have to see what happens now. I got to see what happens with the OTC. This is how you get me locked in as a wrestling fan. This is the kind of content I need to see. It speaks exactly to my experience. So Roman Reigns got his shoes taken on wrestling. And this is what I need. This is what I need in my life. I know a lot of non-hood wrestling fans or wrestling fans that didn't grow up around this kind of stuff are confused. When you get your shoes taken, it's the ultimate sign of disrespect. Like if you get jumped and somebody steals your shoes, that's it. Like it, like that's like the old school where you slap, where they take the glove off and slap dude in the face and then have a gunfight, like a duel or sword duel after that. That's what that is. That's that level. That's that level of disrespect. So I'm interested. I'm invested. I got to see what happens with this story. They haven't got me on this level since they had the real soap opera with the Bloodline, and with Sami Zayn, and that's been a couple of years. So I'm interested to see where this goes. All right. So one of the nerd things that I'm interested in, and I know I'm blasting through these segments, y'all. And so my hope is in the future I will spend more time with these segments. But my ADHD was on overdrive, and so I had a lot to kind of discuss with y'all. But we're almost done. Little bit of a lore drop with me. So I went to school on engineering scholarship, and within about 6 months, I realized I fucking hated engineering. Like I didn't, it was, and I think it was more of the engineering major I was in, which was construction engineering. If I was in something else, I think I would have enjoyed it more, but I didn't understand construction enough to really get the core of the classes. And I switched to being a journalism major. And it was more in line with where I envisioned my future being, because I was working in the radio station that first year. I switched to being a journalism major. I put the two pieces together, like, I'm going to write for The Source. I'm going to write for The Source magazine. I'm going to be a hip hop journalist. I'm going to interview all the big names in hip hop. I'm going to review albums, and really live the experience and write about it. And not as the bullshit hip hop journalists that y'all are familiar with now, like Ack, and Adam 22 and whoever else random, that all they do is just talk about negative, who's beefing with who and drama and who got shot and all that other stuff. That's not hip hop journalism. That's just sensationalist bullshit. I'm talking about in-depth interviews with artists, talking about the actual art form and being a legitimate fan of it, but then also writing about the culture side of things. That was my vision. I wanted to write for The Source. I wanted to review albums. And one of the things I used to do when I worked in the radio station, I was also kind of on the hip hop beat. And so I was the one whose job it was to go find the latest news and latest albums dropping and who's doing what. And so that was really the life that I had planned out for myself. And one of the things is, as a kid, because I was still very much a kid, like I'm like 19, 20 years old, I was very susceptible to adult influence. And when I said that I wanted to drop out of school and go pursue radio, being a radio personality seriously, they staged an intervention on my ass. My mom and one of her cousins staged an intervention on me and talked me out of it. And I let go of the dream. But it's always been something, the journalism thing has always been in my brain. Long Boxing While Black started out as me doing a lot of journalistic research into the articles that I wrote, and trying to take some deeper stabs into, the intersection of nerd culture and race and politics and stuff like that. So I'm saying all that to say this. In my perfect world, I would still be able to do that at 45 years old and actually seriously start writing about hip hop again and interviewing artists and stuff. But the audience for that has shrunk. And I don't think it's necessarily a good thing. I do think that we have kind of crossed into this. We've kind of crossed this inflection point where we've allowed hip hop to be commodified to the point where anybody can jump on and be um, a voice in the culture. I hate that. I hate how people use the culture, but anybody can jump on and be a voice in the culture. And if they have a big enough platform, people are going to listen to them. Like the fact XQC, people care about XQC's opinion about hip hop shows that the entire that format is cooked. Okay, it just does. I'm sorry. Um, There's no there's no other way to put that because you talk about you can't get more of a hip hop tourist than XQC talking about it. Even to a degree, academics is more of a tourist. He talks about the all the negative bullshit going on, all the sensationalized negative bullshit in hip hop, and it's not really news. Like it's like the National Enquirer stuff, right? Um, and so I want more stuff like the Company Man. Company Man on YouTube has real conversations about the music. Even Fantano, I may disagree with him on a lot of stuff, but at least he takes the art form seriously and has some high level conversations around it, and high level breakdowns on music and stuff, and has higher level conversations. Um, and so that was my dream when I was in college. That's what I wanted to do. Like in my perfect world, I'd be writing for the Source magazine before Benzino ruined it. And that was another thing that played into it. So Ray Benzino kind of killed the rest of my dream because I didn't want to write for any other magazine besides the Source. I wanted to, like, okay, I guess I could go mess with XXL. But Ray Benzino ruined. He destroyed. He really did destroy um a chunk of hip hop media with his hubris, trying to get Made Men and you leveraging the Source to make Made Men a household name, and nobody cared. Nobody's cared about Ray Benzino. We didn't care about him in the Almighty RSO days. We didn't care about him when he was in the back of the Source wearing them ugly ass leathers. We don't care about him now. But he tanked the Source just to try to further his career, and it was kind of a blight and a stain on it because he chased out some really really solid hip hop journalists and chased them out. Okay, so the idea is one of the things that Ninth for when I say Ninth, I'm talking about Ninth Wonder. One of the things Ninth Wonder mentioned was um, we do need a lane for adult contemporary hip hop. The same thing that Tom Joyner did with adult contemporary R&B and soul music on his radio station, where he would play older stuff but then mix in newer stuff that embodied the spirit of the older stuff. We need an outlet for adult contemporary hip hop because a lot of these rappers that we grew up with are still making really really good music. Redman dropped an incredible album. Um, the Clips probably dropped the album of the year. Like, and I'm not bullshitting. Like, it's an amazing piece. The Woo's album was pretty dope. Like a lot Ghostface has been dropping really fire stuff. Nas has been dropping some amazing things. And there are some newer artists that are dropping some stuff, and I'm discovering new people every single day. But Joey Badass has been out there doing stuff. Like there's a lot of new, and Joey Badass ain't new. I've been listening to him for almost 10 years. But there's a lot of younger guys that are just coming up that still embody that. I'm still a huge Vince Staples fan. I mess with Vince Staples heavy. My son really did put me on to Tyler the Creator because I was still locked into the Odd Future version of Tyler and wasn't giving him his credit. But he is a big fan, and he put me on to his newer stuff. And so I'm excited where hip hop goes. It deserves a better quality of coverage. Okay. And I was kind of toying with the idea, and I even have the name. I was kind of playing around with the idea of having, a place for adult contemporary hip hop. More on that later on. But, um, I really think that there's a grown up aspect to it, of people who appreciate the culture, still want to hear heat from their artists that they grew up with, but are also open to hear stuff that still respects the culture and isn't just completely driven um, by making money. Because you could tell, I'm be honest with you, you could tell nowadays that who's just throwing shit out there to make money and who's actually trying to make art. Um, Um, but yeah, and the little brother stuff, the little brother, like a couple years ago when little brother dropped their album, that brought me to tears because it was so resonant with where I was in my life and transitions and getting older that I could not stop listening to that album when little brother dropped that a couple years ago. So I know hip hop is a young man's game, right? But just because it's a young man's game doesn't mean that the older statesmen need to stop creating and stop rhyming. I've always taken issue with the idea when Andre 3000 said he doesn't know what else to rhyme about. Rhyme about your life and tell us where you are. Your fans are still out here. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from a grown man. You know, give us your grown man bars. We're interested. We're here. It's better than, Ye doing whatever the fuck Ye is doing. Drake still making songs about, getting scorned by 22-year-old women. I want grown man bars about paying a mortgage and dealing with new back pain, stuff like that. Anyway, so I'm interested in um I'm always gonna be a hip hop head. Like I'm not gonna ever I the thing that used to piss me off when I was younger was I would have friends that would just say, yeah, I've grown out of rap music. I've grown out of hip hop. Okay. And now I'm listening to neo soul. But all the neo soul artists were listening to hip hop. So it is what it is. So this is going to be a conversation. We're going to put a pin in this one. I'm coming back to adult contemporary hip hop because um, this is being a hip hop journalist was my dream. And somehow I need to figure out what can be similar to that. Okay. So about I'm shifting a lot of gears here. Like I said, ADHD was firing all cylinders this week. So in about 2013, 2014, I was climbing my ladder. I was climbing my corporate ladder in social services and in the nonprofit world. And one of the things I wanted to do was get trained in Bridges Out of Poverty to be an official Bridges Out of Poverty teacher. It was interesting. And the thing that fascinated me about the training was there was a little segment in there where it was an activity that they did with we had all the supervisors, which I was one of the supervisors, and then we had all the workers in the room. And they was asking like different rules about survival. Like, and I'm gonna pull up some of the questions here if I can find it. Yeah, I'm gonna pull up some of the questions here if I can find them. Because it was really kind of a fascinating thing. But really it showed the stark difference in how people were raised. Out of poverty, survival. Yeah. Question. Activity. I am butchering the name of this, but I need to get some of these questions on the screen. So basically, it was called The Hidden Rules of Economic Class. And it's based on it was based on the work of Ruby Payne. And there's been some criticism of it recent years, but there's some good resonant stuff in it. And so the questions are used in workshops and trainings to show how people from different socioeconomic strata think and operate in daily life, especially around poverty survival. And the reason why this is something I wanted to talk about was because a couple episodes I did talk about how I was acutely aware of class interacting with black folks that were raised upper class, and I was lower middle class. Okay. And so they would have different questions, and it basically kind of was a signifier to where you grew up. And it was kind of used to predict, what kind of background you came from or whatnot, or what level you were in. But questions like, did you eat today? Do you have a place to sleep? Is it safe? Can you get there without getting in trouble? Um, no, these are not the right questions. These are not the right questions. So hold on 1 second, because I had the website pulled up and I'm on the wrong questions. Because a lot of it was, do you have the ability to fight to defend yourself? Do you have the ability, if you needed to go get a gun, do you know where to get one? And so it was interesting to look around and see who had their hand raised and who didn't. And they were kind of wide-eyed. People who didn't have their hand down, like specifically with the gun question, they're looking at us like, what do you mean? Why would you need to know this kind of stuff? And so it really showed how people grew up. And so it was really kind of a fascinating little expose on it. Like I said, I know that there's been a lot of criticism of that specific work, but I do think it's a valuable conversation to have, because I think a lot of times we do not understand that way we grew up determines a lot about how we perceive the world and how we experience the world. And so um and communication styles and what different parts along the lines of the socioeconomic strata, what they value, you know, what they pay for, and things along those lines. And so, yeah, it's just giving me bullshit questions about how middle class questions or whatnot. Can Sorry, I'm trying to find it because I had it bookmarked, but I don't have it on this computer. So anyway, the way that they framed it was they would ask these different questions, um, and it really determined, like, it just walking. My recollection of it is looking around and seeing, you know, I mean, I hate to break it, it did break down on racial lines. Seeing the black and brown people raise their hand on very specific questions that were attributed to um, lower and middle class questions about, do you have, can you get, if you lost your job tomorrow, do you know how to get a phone turned on? Do you know how to get a weapon? Do you know how to defend yourself? Like things like that. And them not really knowing how to do it. But us with our hands up, we're just kind of looking at them like, y'all don't? Y'all don't know how this works? And so I'm interested. One of these days I may go back just to I may just go back and see if I can pick up that training and find it somewhere. I thought it was super interesting, and I think it's really indicative of. I don't think sometimes I don't think we don't necessarily, when we communication in human language is not the most it's not the most accurate way to communicate, but it's the best way we have, right? Like, I have to translate the thoughts in my brain, the impulses in my brain into words. The words have to cross over into your ears. You have to reassemble the words in a way that makes sense to you, and then you form your thoughts and opinions based on what I said. And it's a lot of things get lost in translation. There are a lot of other things that impact how we intake how we process what's being said to us. Facial expressions, tone of voice, um proximity to the person, our relationship with that person and stuff. And so a lot of times concepts that seem simple when we're communicating aren't, because it's got to go through like 4 different layers before it reaches your intended target. Okay. And so I like stuff like that, which gets us thinking about, okay, how do I communicate to this person in a way that embraces their status as a human being, but also acknowledges the fact that they grew up a little bit different. And so, like I said, it was just kind of an interesting thing. I can't find the questions, and I didn't prep that piece of it, so that's on me. We're gonna keep moving on. Back. So, um, again, man, like I said, this space is really for to talk about all areas of nerd life and culture and humanity. I mean, I know that I don't want to make this is the podcast about everything. I don't want to make that. I don't want to do that. That's not the live stream I want to do. But um there's a lot when it comes to being a black nerd um that you have to consider, because just the signifier of being a black person involved in nerd culture, your purview and your experience is different than your white peers. I remember very clearly we were in our bougie stage. Like me and my wife were in our bougie stage. This is before we had children. We had disposable income. Matter of fact, she was pregnant at the time with our daughter. We go to Whole Foods. Like I said, we had disposable income. We could afford Whole Foods. We would go there to buy fruit and stuff. Um, and I had this dope shirt. Like it was the first cover. It was the cover of Secret Wars 1, and had all the heroes on there. And we're walking around, and little hipster nerdy white dude decides he's gonna test my gangsta on this and asked me if because I think he was thinking that it was the incident where somebody's like wearing a shirt of a band, and they don't know who that band is. You know, I have a Pink Floyd shirt that I used to rock all the time. I love Pink Floyd. And so he probably thought, oh, this guy just bought this shirt because he thought it looked cool. He doesn't know who these people are. And I had to break it down to him like, man, I got this comic book at the crib, bro. Like, what are we talking about here? And it's a stark difference, because I don't think he would have stepped to another white nerd with the accusatory kind of, what do you know about this kind of shit? He wouldn't have done that. But there's an assumption that black folks ain't into comic books. Like at the time there was. I don't think it's as much anymore. But there's this assumption that and there was always a racial signifier to it. And that wasn't the first or the last time I encountered something like that. You know, I love my vintage t-shirts. I love my comic book t-shirts. And the amount of times somebody stepped to me and tried to drill me on who's on this shirt, and I had to run through and say, yeah, and that's Awesome Android, that's Black Bolt. Like I had to run it all the way down to them. And they're like, hold on, you know who this person is? Yes, I know who this is. I'm a nerd, bro. Like I live this shit. This is what I do. And it's weird being a black nerd, because you have people that will test you on that. It's a very strange phenomenon. I don't think y'all are aware of that how often that happens when you're out there just trying to live your best life and rep the culture, and somebody steps to you and tries to treat you like you're a guest or an outsider or a poser or whatever. And so I do think it's important to have these kind of conversations, because there is a difference. There's a lot of really hyper aggressive racist shit in the nerd space online. And they aren't really keen to black nerds. They're not really keen to women who are nerds. They're not really keen to any nerd that's not a straight white dude. They ain't with it. And so all the rest of us are posers in their culture as far as they're concerned. And I'm fine with that. Y'all can have that side of it. I'm gonna be on this side of the street still doing my thing. So that's why the show exists, as a space where we can get together and talk. But then also on some grown man shit. Like I have kids. And I want to talk about some of the things that I encounter as a black father too. Because I'm raising kids that are, for better or worse, just they into their own nerdy interests too. Like, my daughter's a hip hop nerd. Right now she's in her MF Doom phase. Like that's her favorite artist, right? One of her favorite artists right now. Her other favorite artists are the Gorillas and stuff. And so she's going through. My son's favorite artists are Tyler the Creator, but then he also is in the comic books. He was deep into Hunter x Hunter and stuff like that. So there's a lot of nerd. They're getting a lot of nerd, honestly, from me. Hell, when me and my wife met, one of our first conversations was about Dragon Ball. About Dragon Ball Z. So we do nerd heavy in this house. And I think if we try to pretend like it's all one homogenous thing, it's really not though, because a black nerd's experience is completely different. And there's some black nerds that, you know, I remember very clearly dudes that were, they were so enmeshed in wanting to be, into the anime scene that they wanted to be pretend like they were from Japan. Like they would trade the world to be Japanese. I understand it, but I didn't understand it, but that was kind of their thing. And that was really pervasive in the black nerd community where you were so marginalized that a lot of black nerds would develop super hyper anti-black tendencies. It's a real thing. And we're a counter to that. We embrace who we are, our history in this country, and the fact that we like nerd shit. I like comic books and wrestling just like everybody else. There it is. So, and this is a sidebar before we bounce out of here. One of the things is, and I got to be real transparent with y'all. I did not, growing up, my mom did her best. I did not have the best school experience coming up in the world. And it was really interesting to see, because I grew up as a black nerd in the 90s, which was a no-fly zone, bro. Like that was that we didn't exist back then. Even though we did exist, like a lot of the thugged out dudes in my school were still reading comic books. We still talk comic books and stuff like that. But to be considered a black nerd was not the move. It wasn't. And so I did not have the best childhood. And so it's really interesting to see the discourse on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter, y'all. X, kiss my ass, whatever. But seeing the discourse on Twitter talking about, and this is a lot of 2000s babies, and 2010s babies are having these conversations. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people who used to bully kids that were black nerds are basically trying to rationalize their behavior as opposed to just saying, I was pretty terrible back then, man. I grew up from that. They're trying to rationalize it. I've seen people try to rationalize it as they were protecting, it was their way of protecting black culture, or somehow the little nerd kid deserved it. And there were some, I'm not going to say there were some black nerds that were probably assholes coming up. I'm not disputing that fact, but I see a lot of kids that were former bullies trying to retcon and rewrite themselves as as the good guys in it. And don't do that. Don't do that. If you were a bully to kids when you were a kid, own it and move on. But do not get up here and try to tell us how that kid deserved to be bullied, bro. Because bullying took me to some dark places, and I almost didn't make it to 10th grade. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I was in a lot of therapy, and I had some pretty dark moments, and a lot of it had to do with dealing with bullies and just all kinds of other shit at school. And there was times where I didn't want to wake up. And so the impacts were really real. And it's not like it was cyberbullying. This was in your face, because there was no cyber back then. It was going to school and it being hell. And I see a lot of former bullies trying to absolve themselves of being bullies and being terrible to their peers. And specifically in the black community, I see folks that are trying to do that and spin it as some kind of we're protecting, we're protecting gatekeeping blackness, and that's what it was. And the nerds were weird and they smelled funny, and so that's why we made fun of them. And they were ashy and blah blah blah. I don't think that should be your rationale for being a terrible person now. If you were bullied when you were a kid, I don't think that's an excuse. That is no excuse for being an asshole now. But also, don't do that. Just apologize and move on. Don't try to rationalize how you treated that little nerdy kid. Because when somebody says, "Oh, well, this is their way of gatekeeping blackness," how are people gatekeeping blackness from me when I was a little nerdy kid carrying the autobiography of Malcolm X around and reading it anytime I could. But then I was also fascinated with Mystery Science Theater 3000. How does ostracizing that kid who is scared of his peers, how did ostracizing him gatekeep any sort of blackness? At some point, we just got to call it what it was. It was bullying, and it happens. Kids are horrible to each other. Kids are assholes to each other. But let's not try to spin it as something it wasn't. And really focus on teaching your kids to be kind to the kids that are a little bit different. And the kids have different interests or whatnot. You don't have to tolerate little obnoxious racists, but you also don't have to castigate kids that are different for being different, especially black kids. We need to allow black kids to be different. We need to allow them to pursue their own interests and dress the way they want to and listen to the music they want to and connect with parts of the culture they want to, while letting them know that there's still a home for them in the community. And they're not on the island by themselves, because that's what it felt like growing up a lot of times. So I hate to leave it on a downer note, but it was something on Twitter where I saw it and I just thought it was ugly. And I think a lot of adults were trying to rationalize bullying their peers as children and trying to find reasons why somehow they deserved it. And that was not cool either. So, you know, and I've seen it, I don't know who it was. It was one of the people on there that had a pretty big community. You know, almost listening to her rationalize her being cruel to other kids who talked white. I hate that phrase, but I also hate the way that people use it as mocking kind of thing. I still don't like my voice to this day. But growing up, I grew up around the way, bro. Like I grew up in the hood. Like I was not, I wasn't no suburban kid or anything. But I still got mocked for it, when you're talking white. I even had, for the way I pronounce stuff. I called my mom. I had a cousin that made fun of me for that. I had friends that made fun of me for calling my mom, which is weird to me. But I didn't get mocked for that. I got mocked for the way I talked, and I tried my best to fit in, but I could not. I watched the same shows, I listened to the same music, but I also listened to other shit, and I also watched other shows, and I was fascinated by other things, and there wasn't a lane for me to be different comfortably or feel safe being different. And I think maybe that's what I'm going with. I think we need to build, I think as a community, collectively, we do need to give our kids a little bit of a runway to be different. But we also do need to call them out when it starts pivoting into anti-blackness, because that can be a slippery slope, where you allow it to be different to a degree, but then it turns into some self-denigrating, self-loathing, anti-black shit, and that's destructive to the community as well. So there's a balance to be had, but I think we need to allow little black kids to be different and listen to different things, and enjoy different things without making a value judgment on that. And I think we're a little bit more open with it, but I still see it now, specifically. And I think this is a weird tangent, but it kind of fits in. I think it'd be Drewski. Drewski did a little skit about the dude that goes to the club just to dance. And there's a segment of folks in his age cohort who are like, yeah, man, that's funny. Dude just goes to the club dancing. And there's some of us are sitting there like, what's wrong with that? He's going to the club to have a good time. He doesn't care what y'all think. Why is that a negative thing? Why is it bad that he doesn't care what y'all think and he's going to enjoy himself? Why is that bad? And I feel like I feel like in a lot of senses we've given our black kids a little bit more latitude to be themselves, but then also we've shrunk it too. And so it's interesting to see. Anyway, I appreciate y'all dealing with my ADHD firing up because I'm at the end of a long day of recording all day. And so this is why we do this, to have these kind of conversations. I'm thinking maybe the next stream, and I don't know if I'm going to do it. I don't know if I'm going to do it. It feels a little bit more confrontational than I'm used to, but I think I'm going to call it, I will beat your red pill ass. I run into a lot of fake tough shit in the manosphere. The black pills, I run into tough shit from them. A lot of the dudes that call themselves alpha males, there's a lot of fake tough on the internet regarding that stuff. And so I'm going to probably do a stream where I kind of excoriate the manosphere. I got to be in a specific frame of mind to do that, because that's going to absolutely bring a bunch of negative shit into my world and into my community. And I don't necessarily want to I got to be in the right headspace to moderate that. So, but that's something that's going to be coming up here sooner rather than later. So anyway, I do appreciate y'all. I appreciate y'all tuning in. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this thing up. We've been on for about an hour and 20 minutes. Thank you for dealing with my ranty rant stuff. And I appreciate y'all. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see y'all next Tuesday. I'm going to be starting to clip these and turn these into real episodes. So be on the lookout for that. Patreon's going to be launching here probably at the end of the week. Discord community is going to be launching. And we're going to see where this thing goes. I think we have legs. I'll talk to y'all later. Be easy. Peace. If I can get my exit music. Okay, so now I have my exit. Now I have my exit. Talk to y'all later. Peace.